let me just introduce here. I'll rename myself too. I'm Carrie Kopnick, and I serve the Chaplaincy Institute as our community minister. And Rivka Gertz is here with us today, and is going to talk a lot more about the program in just a minute. But I just want to say that the Chaplaincy Institute is really excited to launch this new program in sacred justice ministry. We are a groundbreaker in interfaith everything. And we are the first who was recognized by the Professional Chaplains Association and the BCCI certification process. We pioneered an interfaith spiritual direction program. And now we are meeting this moment in the world with sacred justice ministry. The Chaplaincy Institute, of course, is an interfaith seminary founded 25 years ago, and we've ordained now almost 300 people and have almost that many spiritual directors out practicing that were trained here at the Chaplaincy Institute. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to turn it over to Rivka to introduce the program and talk a little bit more about it, what it's about. And then I will kind of play MC and ask some of the questions that have come in already and that are being asked as people are registering for the program, or applying for the program. And then we'll open it up to any questions that folks have. We are recording tonight, hoping that we can capture some pieces that maybe we can share with the general public who couldn't be with us here today also. All right, so Rivka, take it over.
Yes.
Let's see what you've got.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. And welcome. So we've been talking about this program for almost a year now in small groups, one-on-one with stakeholders and students and faculty, because the world as a whole has really become much more aware of the ways that oppression plays out in people's lives, the intersectionality of everything from race to gender to immigration status, all of the different things that make up who we are. We've become much more aware of the ways that we meet each other and unfortunately don't always meet each other in a place of grace as a society. And we've been watching many of our collaborative organizations, like the Parliament of World Religions this summer was very focused on issues of oppression. And we're in a moment where those of us who come alongside people in the spiritual realms of spiritual care are also recognizing that, there is much work to be done. So for those who weren't able to join us about a month ago, we had a Chi Talk that laid out our vision and used that as something of a workshopping of the final ideas. And from that, I've been in further conversations with the people who attended that Chi Talk and have further refined the program. And so what we're going to do today is kind of lay out what it entails, answer your questions, and continue visioning together about how we can be instruments of healing in this world. So, Beautiful. Carrie, do you want to begin us with some questions?
I will play, I don't know who's the MC, Pat Sajak. Anyway. Thank you so much, Rivka, though. I'm so excited about this program. I can't tell you what it means to work for an organization that is so committed to justice in this context, this interfaith context. So our first question, and I think the one that I've heard the most frequently, is what will I be able to do with this certificate?
Well, one of the things that we've been doing for a long time is training people who are not only chaplains, but also training people who become community ministers. For many people, the route of working in a hospital or hospice isn't the only way to serve. as we've learned. We've have people who've gone out to become community ministers and movement ministers, prison ministry, eco ministry. All of these are ways of coming together and making a difference in the lives of people in need. And while there are many excellent social justice programs out there, one of the things we observed is that pretty dominantly they are secular in nature, or they are from a particular um, faith tradition. Nobody else has our experience at guiding an interfaith awareness and dialogue. And so what will come out of this experience is that, we'll gain some skills around being able to understand the intersectionality of oppressions, how those impact marginalized people, the ways that religion and spirituality can both help but have also been used as tools of oppression. And we'll also be looking at, how we address the trauma that is interwoven in the lives of so many that we serve, and by extension, the moral injury that is experienced by the people we work with in areas that are trying to do good work but are within systems that are affected by our dominant culture's white supremacy and oppression matrices. So with these skills, what people will be prepared to do when they leave is, this is pretty non-traditional work in many ways. And so some people will be called to go into street ministry. Other people will be called to become very active in terms of eco ministry. And others may decide that they want to really go into an area where spirit and justice intersect. So, for instance, in nonprofit organizations, those are a variety of the ways. This is new and cutting edge stuff. Traditionally, people went the track of hospitals or chaplain or hospices, institutions. The need is everywhere today. And so there are many different ways that people can serve.
Thank you so much. I can see it being useful in anything we do to come in with that standpoint of understanding this intersection.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And that's what I've been telling people. How could you not use it? Anyway, but no, it is important when we're going to spend money and come into a program to understand what we're going to get.
And the other thing to add is that, many credentialing bodies today are asking their ministers, their therapists, their chaplains, to get trained up in understanding justice issues, because it is everywhere. And so this is also this 12 credit program, because we our credits are in line with the Association of Professional Chaplains. These credits can be applied as continuing education for people who are already working in the field or who want to specialize in the field.
That's great. That's powerful. Wow. Wow. Thank you. Um, One thing, I'm going to jump off script just a little bit here, but I I I have so much respect for you, Rivka, and your professional experience. So since you are your core faculty, and but you're the director of this program, so can you give a little context to how you come to this work and what you're bringing with you from your professional and lived experience?
Certainly. Well, what I've told folks is that I've been working at the intersection of faith and justice since 1984. I've been doing this originally. I started doing this as a member of the diaconate for MCC, which Metropolitan Community Churches were the first congregation denomination that supported queer folk, and we were on the ground at the start of the AIDS pandemic, and so I learned in the cauldron of the AIDS pandemic how to be present for this kind of work. I went on from there to work in other queer organizations, environmental organizations, working with elders, working with children, but always at that intersection of justice and faith. Sometimes it was singularly faith in terms of being involved in Jewish organizations. Other times it was decidedly interfaith organizations that I was working for. And in addition to being staff in all of these environments, I've also served on boards, been executive director, been director of the programming, been principal of religious education, all of these pieces that have had a justice focus for over 30 years before I even came to seminary. And I thought I was going to leave all of that behind. And it is my true calling. It is the work that, when I came here, like so many people who come to Chi, we know we want to serve, but we don't know exactly what that is. And because of my AIDS work and working with elders, people kept saying, oh, you should be a death doula, go become a hospice chaplain. And that once I got here and started studying, I realized that my calling to service at this intersection of ministry was still loud and clear. And so that's what brings me to this work. And I feel very blessed that I get to have this evolution of service that continues to pass on what I've learned over the years, working with others who know so much more than I do, and who are with me in helping to bring in a new awareness in terms of the moment we're in as clergy people, as spiritual care providers.
Thank you. Thank you. So you are the right person and this is the right moment. And it sounds to me like you were made for this and you were formed to lead this program. So
Thank
we
you.
are blessed and honored that you're here to do that work. Okay. One of the other questions that came in, um, what are the topics of each module? Or
So
even the structure, like what are those?
right. So we loosely touched on that at the Chi Talk, but to just drill down a little bit. Some of the first courses that folks will take are actually already baked into our ethos and what we're already doing. So the way we've lined this up is so that the very first course that students will take is the Chi culture and foundation, so that they really get an understanding of where we as Chi are coming from, not only in terms of our interfaith perspectives, but in our understanding of cosmology and spirituality and whatnot. So the classes in that course, that first weekend in September, include spirituality for folks who are beyond religion. In other words, SBNR folks, spiritual but not religious, cosmology and eco-spirituality, tools for culturally responsive and inclusive spiritual spaces, recognizing and responding to religious wounding, as well as noticing the divine and the many images of the divine, and systemic oppression and spiritual care. Everyone at Chi takes that, and we felt like that it was important that was the first intensive that students participate in. The second intensive, traditionally up until now, has been the Sacred Justice Ministry class, course, but it is now becoming the foundation. The name of it will now be Foundations in Sacred Justice. And it will continue with much of what we've had, but with a little bit of tweaking. We will continue to have the two deep dives in asynchronous learning through Moodle, in liberation theologies and sacred justice social justice movements, as well as the human and sexualities course. And we'll continue to have, the deep culture and intersectionality class, prison ministry, the all of a sudden my brain just, senior moments, they happen sometimes. The Sacred Justice in Action, where students really do a survey of, what are the organizations doing good works near them? An intro to nonviolent communication, storytelling as an expression of human sexuality. And the new one that is being added this time is classism and economic justice. So that one is only going to have a small tweak, because really that's the class that sets up an understanding of how all of these different issues intersect with one another. So then the next class that folks are going to take is also one of our foundational courses. It's going to be Global Spiritual Traditions 1. And so it already exists and as its final form, but for folks who are joining us who don't know how we're structured these days, because you either did it a long time ago or are just coming to us, it consists first before the intensive weekend with a couple of Moodle classes that are asynchronous, the intro to Buddhism and intro to Taoism and Confucianism are done asynchronously before the intensive weekend. And then on that weekend, students will be learning about integral spirituality, Buddhism, shamanism, how people of African heritage express spirituality, integral spirituality, which is a newer understanding for folks who have not delved into some of the more current thinking, how we hold a 7th-generation perspective from indigenous traditions, Hinduism, and an introduction to contemporary paganism. Then we get our first new course of this particular certificate. This is a course that isn't part of the curriculum that any other students get. This is specifically for us. And this is the Countering Oppression Through Spiritual Care Intensive. And that will also have an introductory Moodle class before the intensive weekend, which is going to be called Rooted in Resilience. So looking at trauma-informed spiritual care practices. And then when we come together in the live class, there'll be a second edition of that, so that we really look at how we apply these spiritual care practices in a trauma-informed ways, not only with the people we're serving, but how to sustain ourselves as we're coming alongside people who are affected by trauma in the ways that it intersects with different forms of oppression. In addition to that, there'll be a class on religion as a tool of oppression, trauma as a symptom of oppression, religious wounding and moral injury, addiction and harm reduction, healthy boundaries for justice work, ethics for community ministry, and prayer as a form of intervention. So that all of that is new material in some cases. In other cases, it's a specific lens of some stuff that students would get if they're taking this spiritual care and concerns class. There's some echoes of that, but it's coming from a very specific understanding of this lens of justice. Then students will go on for their next intensive to Global Spiritual Traditions 2, which are the Abrahamic traditions. So the Moodles for that are the same as they are for everyone else. It's intro to Christianity and Protestant denominations, intro to Sufism, and intro to Judaism. And then on the weekend of the intensive, there's the intro to Islam, Judaism integrations and professional applications, social teachings of Christianity as forms of spiritual care, Christian women mystics, Islam in terms of how its professional applications are handled, and new this time around, we're adding Jewish mysticism to that class. What has been an elective up until now and is still available as an elective is eco-ministry. But it is a required part of this certificate program. So for folks who have not taken that as an elective, it continues to have much of the same classes. It has the spiritual grounding, the communal response and ceremonies and rituals to ground people in celebrating, the environment. The truth mandala experience, which some of us got to experience at retreat just a few weeks ago. Justice transitions, transforming society around ecology, deep adaptation, and exploring eco and resilience. And we're talking about adding some additional coursework that we have time before this cycle of it, which will be in 2025. We're exploring adding some teachings around environmental justice and eco-womanism. Another class that is currently an elective, but is also a required for this certificate, is Work of Beloved Community, which is taught by our friend Mtwasa Johnson. And it will continue to follow much of what he has done there, looking at multicultural foundations and context, how ritual comes into understanding the African diasporic experience, traces of the trade, which is the way how he expresses, the Middle Passage and how that continues to have repercussions to this very day. Who we are today and is his one of his wrap-up classes, and steps for us to take personally and as community actions. What we're also looking to add to it when it happens in 25 at the later section of this first cohort is adding a class on the spiritual wisdoms of Africa, as it applies to this the issues of beloved community and how we manifest that. And then the final course weekend for this is a new one that is again specific to this program, and that's advocacy, action, and allyship. And it will have one Moodle class, which will be tools of engagement, how we utilize media and letters to the editor and PSAs as ways of creating energy around an action and initiatives. When we come together for the weekend, we'll be looking at prophetic voice through the concept of public speaking, not only how we give sermons, but how we give testimony, how we get our message across, how we help others speak the truth of their lived experience. We'll have a section on active bystander and trauma-informed de-escalation techniques. Movement ministry, which is, we call it as movement ministry, is more than marches, because there's a lot that goes into supporting the justice warriors who are out there. A class called on empowering others. Being in a position of true allyship means we're not the white saviors. We are there to make space and create space for the voices to be heard that are part of the marginalized communities. So learning more about how to really stand in thoughtful allyship as opposed to performative allyship. Then we'll also have a section on liturgies and rituals of protest and hope, a class on moving from existential dread to sustainable resilience, because so much feels so weighty to people. How do we rest into resilience and renew ourselves and those that we serve? There'll be a prophetic witness so that focuses specifically on lobbying and public testimony and state measures, how we show up, on those lobby days when we need to make the voice of spirit heard in the halls of justice. And lastly, a class on coalition building and collaboration with other organizations, both secular and religious.
Wow. I hadn't heard it all broken down so detailed. That's wonderful. That's really exciting. Go program. Go you and Katrina and everybody that dreamed this into existence.
It's been a collaborative effort. It's been really a blessing.
It's time. It's time. It's coming together. Two quick questions defining our terms. Moodle is an online learning platform, and there are readings, there are group discussions, are there videos or things that you,
Right.
yeah, okay.
Short videos, as well as chapters and articles and web pages. It's very multimedia oriented, and it's also a platform on which students can share their reflections and comment on each other's reflections.
Okay. And that work starts a couple of months before there's you called it an intensive, so that's a 3-day, like, always a 3 day, almost always a
Yeah.
3 day
Mhm.
course that is all on Zoom.
Right, right.
Okay.
Barbara asked the question if, let me just see if
Oh,
it
thank
popped
you.
on my screen and then went away. And so let me see if I can see
Do
it.
you have a
Yes,
document that gives all the
yes,
details? Yes.
all of that is in the course catalog for Sacred Justice Ministry, which uh, it is in its final edition, iteration of being edited by the dean. And so we will have that available. If people would like us to send that to them, please put your email address in the chat, and within the next few days that will be coming to you. We're just doing a final proofread to make sure we've got dotted all of our i's and crossed all of our t's.
Thank you. I just put the link to the website, the web page.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Barbara. I think I have everybody's email address if they registered ahead of time too.
Okay. Great.
And so then is there any, this is all online? Is there any,
Yes, this particular program is completely online. Because we wanted to make it as accessible to folks everywhere as possible, we opted not to have folks required to come to our annual retreat. I mean, certainly alumni and folks are always welcome to come to retreat, but we made the decision that this program in and of itself is strictly online. So it'll either be, the asynchronous Moodle classes or the synchronous Zoom intensive weekends.
like 9 to 4 Pacific time?
Correct.
Yeah. If you're in Germany, it's hard to come. I think we've only had one student who was in England for a while. Um, now I believe there's a cohort time expectation, and
Right.
tell me about that.
Right. So for our current students in both I know definitely in the chaplaincy program, and I think also in the spiritual direction program, they when they come in, they join a small cohort of 5, 6 people, which allows folks to build a social network, get support, help each other as we come into formation. Back in the days when we met in person, we did that organically by going to coffee after the course was done. But since we are in a virtual space, we needed to create that virtual cafe, as it were. That will continue to happen twice a month, just as it does in the other program. But this program actually will meet once a week. So for the whole 12 month of the initial cohort, the alternating weeks between the usual structure of the cohort are going to be peer-led learning labs. So obviously there are so many permutations and so many issues that are part of justice. We wanted to create a space in which students can really delve into and advocate for, and get their training wheels on how to advocate by sharing with their peers issues of justice which are important to them. It'll be a time to go deeper than some of the generalized classes, like our global spiritual traditions classes can, in looking at how a specific tradition deals with issues of justice and fairness, and how that plays out in their lived experience. Might be one way that a student decides to delve in. If somebody is doing their practicum, and we'll talk about practicums in just a minute, but if they're doing their practicum and learning some really important skills that they feel like they want to model to their peers, that's the part of the program where they'll be engaged in that. And I have a vision that I want to lift for folks, and that is that these peer learning labs have the possibility of becoming a powerful think tank. What is it that interfaith wisdom can bring to the moment we are in, that the dominant culture, of secular capitalist Christocentric, which, that isn't in and of itself a bad thing, but its tool of oppression has made it problematic for many people. They've created, what we call a hegemony, a system by which we think and move and everything. But what can the wisdom traditions that we celebrate at Chi bring to this moment that we are in, both in terms of our interpersonal relationships and in terms of our connection with the planet? Because one of the things that we feel important throughout this course is the reality that we are living in what's now called the Anthropocene era. We are in climate crisis in a way that we don't know yet how it's going to affect us, but we do know that it will be another layer of that intersectionality. And so as we do all of these different courses and the peer labs, we're looking at, what does this moment call of us, and what does the wisdom of the spiritual traditions collectively, through their synergy and through voices that the dominant culture has drowned out, what's the wisdom that this moment needs?
Wow, inspiring. And those cohorts sound like an excellent place for the integration, the learning to come into
Absolutely.
life. Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the practicum. What?
Right. So for folks who are in the chaplaincy program, as well as folks who are in the spiritual direction program, in each case, um, there is that lived experience of being in a practicum. Either if it's with spiritual direction, it's working with potential clients. If it's a chaplaincy student, maybe they're doing CPE, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're working in a hospice or some other organization. Similarly with this program, part of the learning is only made manifest through doing what we have called applied theology. So we ask that students commit to 200 hours of practicum over the course of the year, and to do that with an organization that they care about in the area that they live. Maybe it's an organization that they want to get their toe into, or maybe it's an issue that they really want to ground into their experience as part of their calling. And so having 200 hours in the field that has a mentor in that organization that works with them and also lets us know, what is it the student's been up to? How are they making a difference in the world? And how can the experience become manifest into, often our practicums are the the networking tool that allows us to really blossom into the work we're going to do. We're requiring 200 hours. If somebody wanted to do, a full 400 hours, which is what is equivalent for CPE, there are a couple of CPE programs that are not hospital oriented. And so there are ways that one can expand upon this if they really are very clear that they want to go into, for instance, working with the unhoused. I know of a couple of different folks who've come through Chi who did their practicums with organizations that allowed them to support the homeless or those who have housing insecurity. So if somebody wanted to do that in concert, that would probably be something we could help them discern.
I know that Naropa has the Buddhist institution has a new clinical pastoral education program.
They
Yeah.
do. And one of our own faculty, Susan Shannon, is involved with a version that works not only with prison ministry, but with other types of organizations as well. So there are ways to get the credentials one wants to move into a specific area of justice, in the same way that there are for people who want to work in the more traditional atmospheres of hospitals, hospices, and colleges.
I think those practicum experiences are often where we figure out what that call is. What are you going to do with it?
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's great. Thank you. That's wonderful. You've talked a little bit about people who already have a G certificate or an ordination. So how many courses could be waived for the Sacred Justice Ministry certificate program if somebody already has something from the Chaplaincy Institute?
It in part depends on when they came to Chi because of how we have restructured post-pandemic. If they've come within the most recent years, I think what I heard, and I am not positive of this, is that, potentially up to 4 classes, if they've taken like, you know, Chi found, Chi culture and foundations, if they've taken GST 1 and 2, things like that, that are already baked into
Yeah.
our program, those would be waived. For those of them who came in my generation and earlier, we've changed our pedagogy so much that would be a conversation with the dean to determine what could and could not be waived.
Okay. And like so many things, it's very individual, right? Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But there's not just a rubric, it's a conversation.
Right. It's a conversation, that is based in, what you've been doing, since you've been in Chi, where your work has been, as well as, when you were here and what was our construct at that time and how can it be translated?
Yeah. So what is there now I know the spiritual direction and the chaplaincy program can have a dual track where you do
Right.
both at once. And will that be true for Sacred Justice Ministry?
That is my understanding that we should be able to do that. That is something that the dean has to make a decision on, but that is my understanding that that's where we're heading.
Okay, I can't wait to see who's the first triple track.
Absolutely.
Somebody
Oh
that
my
took off.
gosh.
Oh, that would be fun. And if anybody's considering that, yeah, the time at the Chaplaincy Institute is precious and everybody misses it when they leave. So maybe do it all at once or maybe come back and
And
do it
and
again.
and that's the other thing is, we, like any other ordaining body, do require continuing education. And so if you've already been through everything and you just want to, take something for continuing education, you know, that's another advantage of this program is that it's well suited to that.
And then the last question that people have been asking, and this was from a recent call to our community, will you address issues of mental health problems in this course?
So what I can say about that is, obviously there are so many things that we wish we could include, and what do we take in, what do we take out, and it's always a challenge. What I can say specifically about that is the area that we will focus on in terms of mental health are issues of trauma because they are so interwoven with experiences of oppression. Um, Many of our classes will have a trauma-informed focus. And so that part of mental health is something we are very committed to. And of course, students who are part of our chaplaincy track already do take spiritual psychology and whatnot. But because it's a finite amount of time that we have available, we have there's so much that we need to cover, and so really it's only the trauma aspects of mental health that we can address.
It is a marginalized group of people. So in all the ways you talk about people who are marginalized and
Right.
justice and equity, that it will
Exactly.
be.
Yeah. And so often trauma is about power over
Yeah.
in all of its manifestations. It's about somebody taking power away from and having power over someone. And so it is a symptom of oppression. And
Yeah.
so it is interwoven in so many experiences and so many different ways of people having to face the challenges that their life and their intergenerational experience, their historical experience, both as a community and as an individual, all of that comes into play with trauma. And that's, because you know, we're spiritual care providers, not therapists. And so that's where we have to draw the line, I'm afraid.
Sure. And I do hear and see in our courses a recognition of neurodiversity and a recognition of mental
Absolutely.
health. So
And neurodiversity isn't what one would necessarily call a mental health
no, no, no,
issue.
no, no,
And
no.
so, yes, I mean that is a part of our population that is marginalized to a large extent, by neurodominant perspectives of how we are supposed to be and behave and think. So that is something that gets touched on,
Yeah.
but it is a different experience than spending as much time as we would wish we could on mental health issues.
And part of our DNA here at the Chaplaincy Institute is radical inclusion of all
Absolutely.
kinds of brains and all kinds of ways of moving through the world and all kinds of ways of being a human. So
Absolutely.
we respect and honor all different folks. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to open it up. And Rivka, is there anything else you wanted to be sure we covered before we invite the group to ask questions?
Um, I'm anxious to hear what questions folks have. So yeah, let's open it up.
Barbara, go ahead. Go ahead.
I am a graduate in um, the spiritual direction program. I'm also ordained community minister in the Unitarian Universalist denomination from Starkin.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been a practicing community ministry since 2004 in the area of mental health. I was the one that asked that question about mental health. So I was very interested in this program for basically the idea that you mentioned about doing continuing education. So what I'm wondering if it's possible when I see the whole program that you just mentioned to get in a dialogue with you about if there's a class or two that I might take as part, not going through the entire program, but a
Certainly.
class or two I might take for community education. And I'd also be willing to be a thought, something, if you want to talk to someone who's worked with mentally ill people for this is my 20th year now, and you wanted to see if there's anything that I might be able to offer, I would be happy to get into a conversation with you about that.
Well, thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Well, I will be happy to send you the full catalog so you can dive into that and see what questions arise to you.
We appreciate our people. Thank you, Barbara.
Absolutely.
But taking one or two of the classes,
Yeah,
continuing education is possible.
it is. I mean, our initial plan, for the launch of this has been that it would be a year-long cohort. And we understand that people's lives are unique and different. And so one of the things that we have thrown around and that we don't know that we can manifest just yet, it will depend on how many people actually apply, and numbers and whatnot. But one of the things that we are envisioning and hope to manifest is that there could be a secondary cohort for people who are doing it as continuing education here and there, as opposed to going through for the whole certificate.
Okay.
Haven't got all the nuts and bolts down on that part yet.
Okay, thank you.
The cohorts would probably be different in some ways.
Right, exactly. It would be a unique cohort of folks who are already working in the field and are doing this as continuing education. So that we're still trying to figure out the nuts and bolts around, in part because different ordaining bodies, different credentialing bodies have different criteria. So we're still looking at how that might play out for folks.
Right.
In the case, for instance, of APC, they ask people to have 50 hours of continuing education a year. And so a 12 credit program for 1 year fits in nicely to that. But other entities have different considerations and questions.
Okay, thank you.
I think Carrie froze. Yep, we lost her for a second. So I'm sure she will rejoin us. What other questions do folks have? Oh, Crystal, it looks like you've got your hand up.
I think Crystal's popped a question here in the chat
Oh, okay.
for you, Rivka.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, thank you. I
Oh, okay.
wasn't able to get to my screen in time. Thank you.
No,
Okay.
you're good.
Prereqs for this class. As with everything at Chi, it's ideal that folks have had a bachelor's degree, but we believe very strongly in lived experience. And so that's a question that our dean and the admissions team looks at in terms of, you know, what counts. People don't really have to have any pre-required experience in this field to take the certificate. When you first come to Chi, whether it's for this program or the chaplaincy program, you participate in a Moodle class, a Moodle session that is a primer in prophetic voice, and that is the only prerequisite that I require before folks take other things, because that helps you really understand the nuances of our own social locations. We don't think very much in this culture about, you know, on forms we see African American, Asian American, and then we see white. We're not enculturated to think about all of the different things that make up who we are: our race, our color, our birth order, our gender, both perceived and lived, you know, all of these different things that go into making us who we are our social identities. And those social identities afford us both privileges and experiences of oppression. So that first Moodle class that is a primer is the requirement that allows people to really look at their own reality, look at the concepts of unconscious bias and microaggressions, and the ways you know, when we say something or we hear something and it is experienced as a racist or a prejudiced experience by somebody and they tell us so, it's not uncommon when we hear from them to say, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. But microaggressions are a way that we don't think about what we don't know about the lived experience of someone else. And when they live with those things off and on, you know, one of the things that we talk about, it's kind of like a mosquito sting. You know, everybody can handle one or two mosquito stings, but if you hear the same thing over and over and over again, at some point you really want to swat that mosquito. So looking at all of those things that help us understand our reality before we know what we need to be conscious of in somebody else's lived reality. So that's the only prerequisite is that Moodle primer.
Thank you. Okay, but there is an application process. You don't just register.
That's correct. That, you know, the question was specifically about prerequisites, but yes, there is an application process. And you can, and we're having a June 15th deadline for applications, and then the applicants will go through a opportunity to speak with me as a part of the application experience. And those who are chosen for the cohort will then participate in a about a 2-hour orientation in early to mid-July. We haven't set the date on that yet, but it'll probably be one of the first 2 weekends in July, to help orient you to the program, into the expectations and set you on your way so that you're doing some of that Moodle pre-learning before the September first intensive.
Fantastic, fantastic. And it's admissions at Chaplaincy Institute. Is that where you
That's correct.
reach out to apply? Okay, super.
That's right.
I should know these. But yeah. All right. Anybody else questions or you want to talk about what you've heard in any way? Or you put your question in the
Yes, Luke.
Hi, thanks so much for this. Just a quick question, because I'm starting on the chaplaincy process, and spoke a little bit about the opportunity for potentially combining the two if possible in the future, or
Right.
you know, that sort of thing. Am I right that the two courses that aren't offered, that aren't electives or required ones, are for the chaplaincy program, are countering oppression and advocacy, action, and allyship?
Correct. Yes.
Is that right? Those are the two?
Those are
Okay.
the two that are unique to this program, because foundations and sacred justice is something that we require all the chaplaincy students to participate in as well,
Cool.
whether they're going to pursue this as their work or not, because everyone will run into some of those issues,
Sure.
depending on who they serve.
Cool. Excellent. So yeah, and I appreciate that it may be a closed cohort and not open, you know, those courses might not be open to other students, but just wanted to double check that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you.
You're very welcome. And for any of you, if you have questions that come up over the, after you got offline and go, oh, I wanted to know, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
I'll put your email address in the chat.
Thank you, Carrie.
The right one. Not the I keep emailing Rivka at the wrong email address. I'm trying to be better. Right? That's the right one.
That's the right one. Yay.
Okay. Oh. And Luke, welcome. I'm really glad you're here. I'm glad you chose the Chaplaincy Institute.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Nice to see you all.
Yeah. Any other questions or things that have come up for you that you'd like to explore, friends? One question that we haven't talked about, and we don't really have an answer for yet, as I understand it, is the cost of the program. But I think we can give a ballpark, because our spiritual direction program is about, it's probably going to be more than the spiritual direction program, but it's going to be not as much as the chaplaincy program and probably a little bit more than the spiritual direction. Is that about right, Rivka? Is that your
I believe so. We are still waiting to hear what fees are going to be applied to this program from the powers that be. And the other piece is that, I am continuing to pursue fundraising because we recognize that the amount that we have to charge is an issue of privilege. And it is still, I am very committed to trying to find sources that will help us launch a scholarship program that is sustainable, that will allow folks who are not privileged financially to be able to follow their calling. So send out prayers and white light and Reiki and all other forms of hope, because we are continuing to write those grants and seek those funds so that we can make this a much more equitable and cost-effective program for folks.
It's so hard because we have a commitment to pay faculty in a fair way, and we have a commitment to do good work in the world and pay our vendors well. And we have a commitment to make the programs affordable. So it's deeply felt by all of us here at the Chaplaincy Institute. So when you see that total, know that we're really working hard and it matters. And thank you. I know you've applied for a lot of grants. So thank you very much.
We
Oh,
continue to hope and to work towards that dream.
the data that we have to pull together for those, my goodness. Anyhow. All right, friends, let's see. It's almost time. So is there anything else that would like to be said? Anyone else have something that's moving for them that they'd like to share? Well, I want to say again that this is a really exciting time at the Chaplaincy Institute, that we're very, very excited to again be making the path as we walk it, making the path as we move through it here at the Chaplaincy Institute, as we have been doing for 25 years, pioneers in the field of interfaith work of all kinds. So I hope that you'll continue the conversation about this, and like Barbara, bring up here's what I think, here's what I want to do, here's what I have to offer, because we're all in this together. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you so much for your interest, and thank you so much, Rivka, for everything, for this time together, and for your commitment to this program and writing all those grants and all of it.
Thank you, Carrie. And thank you everybody for participating. And if you hear of others who you think this would be a fit for, let us know, let them know about us. And we're happy to have those conversations with people.
I think the comps team is putting together a kit so that people can share the information, the flyers and social media and emails and a pamphlet and all of that. So, all right. I'll stay on for a minute if anybody wants to talk off recording. But thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.